Welcome to another edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. Today I'm joined by Mike Doherty, the chairman of the Children's Rights Council of Illinois. We're going to talk about family law reform and family court concerns. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Now, first off, we hear a lot of complaints about this presumed every other weekend visitation schedule, which typically targets dads and is widely regarded as being unfriendly to children. The good news is some states have started to abandon this model. So could you explain why certain jurisdictions are moving away from it?
Basically, the studies have become a lot more consistent. They started back 20 years ago with Joan Kelly pointing out that an every other weekend schedule was only befitting a disinterested father. Well, we don't want to make fathers act, put them in a position where they might end up being forced to act disinterested in their own children. So she spoke out about that, and then her work influenced others, and so then we had 4 or 5 major child development specialists and even practitioners in the last 10 years say that at a minimum we should be looking at 33-35% parenting time for any parent who's fit, caring, and geographically accessible, but is yet a non-resident or non-custodial parent. And then we've had practitioners, some of whom have testified here in Illinois, that are nationally recognized custody evaluators, say that their recommendation is nearly equal parenting time. So those specialists, I think, have influenced these other municipalities. Plus, we've had judges and attorneys step up and say, you know what, every other weekend causes a lot of problems.
What are some of the states that are doing it right, that have sort of established more of a shared parenting time?
What we've seen is that most of the change is coming from individual court, district courts, and metro counties that are progressive. We have mostly anecdotal evidence, and happily we don't have the statistics, but the anecdotal evidence out of places like Portland, Oregon, Janesville, Wisconsin, where it is known, and other states, I could say some statewide states that have an often practice with shared parenting results for both parents would be like Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, California, we hear a lot about. And we know this because these parents moved to Illinois, which is not that way, and they're shocked at the difference from their state to our state. We have attorneys who move here from those states and say they are shocked at the difference. And so there's some states for you, some municipalities as well, that, and then down to some individual court districts.
Well, what are the chances that this shift away from the every other weekend parenting time, what are the chances that it will become more widespread and benefit children throughout the country, not in just a handful of states or cities?
Well, we're very concerned about how are we going to make that happen. And outside of possibly passing a state or federal law that says, look, we've got to have, we've passed state, federal laws to create uniformity in child support formulas, in child support collections. Right. Why do we have uniformity in that, and yet we don't have any uniformity as to what constitutes the best interest of a child with respect to their access to their both their parents as a presumption? Now remember, we're not talking cookie cutter here. We're not saying that you're going to pass a law and say every child has to spend this amount of time between the two parents. We're saying, where does the judge start in presuming is the best interest and then deviate from? Where they're starting now is at the low end of the ladder and saying we're going to start an absolute minimum, have everybody fight uphill to have enough parenting time to have a reasonable relationship with their child. We're saying let's start with a reasonable relationship and deviate from there.
If you're a dad facing a upcoming child support obligation, which states would you not want to be in?
Illinois.
Illinois.
One of the worst states in the country for windfall recipients. It's not just about windfalls. It's about formulas that are not rational from the standpoint of an economist. They don't make sense economically. We're one of a handful of states left in the U.S. that determine child support purely on the income earned by the non-resident parent. No adjustment whatsoever for the income that's being earned by the custodial or resident parent. That's right off the top absurd. Right. There's a lot of other ways in which Illinois just disregards the joint earning potential of both parents. Most of these divorces, you realize, these are not may have been true 50 years ago, I don't know, but certainly in the last 30 years in my lifetime, these fathers not runaway dads. They wanted to remain involved with their children. So the idea that, I think these, one-sided, only one side pays models were sort of developed with an attitude of, well, that person's run away from their obligations. Actually, both parties have mutual obligations today. They both recognize it, and we need some balance there on the financial side so that we're not just balancing the parenting time, but we're also balancing the financial support.
Sure. You and I have talked before about the lack of missing data on separated parents. What exactly is the data that's missing, and why is it important?
Well, again, coming back to Illinois, not to beat it up too much, but we do not have much in the way of data, and what data we have is outdated, and it's under the Illinois Vital Statistics Act, and there's some other aspects connected to that act where our public health agencies are required to keep, let's see how many people got divorced and how many maybe involved children. But that's all we know. We do not know anything about the disposition of those children, and that is common. This sort of lack of data is common throughout the United States. These are very important figures to know. We cannot improve the situation for divorced families and these at-risk children if we don't have any data to go on.
Well, finally, some of the numbers that we do have show that there's a large number of children born to unmarried parents. Now, what can we do to address this situation better, since typically unmarried fathers have few rights when it comes to seeing their children?
Yeah, and I'm sure Illinois is not the only state out there, or as I imagine that we're consistent with the rest of the country. I think we are. About 77,000 children a year are born in Illinois to unmarried parents, where only 35,000 per year are going through a divorce. And these unmarried parents have been shown by a British study to be much more at risk of a breakup than married parents are. And we just found out recently through testimony of the Illinois Family Law Study Committee that we're seeing in Illinois courts about 40% of the parents coming into the court system with custody and visitation issues are not married. So, and we think they'll be over 50% pretty soon. And yet, we have two acts in Illinois. I don't know what you have there in Missouri. I'd love to find out. But we have we have one act for everybody who's married, and then we have one for the paternity. We call the paternity dads. I've been assured by judges that, it used to be true that paternity dads were treated differently, and the Paternity Act was interpreted differently than for the rest, but that we've changed now. Well, it's one thing to say that, but I hear an awful lot of stories where paternity dads seem to be fighting a much greater uphill battle under the paternity statutes than the married and now divorced dads have to fight. And over in Indiana, my counterpart over there played a pivotal, a significant role in getting some statutes revised, working through other people, and those statutes now provide a lot of the same protection for parenting time, which was rather unique to Indiana to even address that issue, but extend those benefits and that protection to paternity dads. And we need to do that over here, too, in other states.
You're right. Well, Mike, I want to thank you for joining us, and best of luck in your efforts bringing family law reform to Illinois and across the country.
Thank you very much. I sure enjoyed being on.
That was Mike Doherty, the chairman of the Children's Rights Council of Illinois. If you want to learn more information about Mike and his organization, you can go to the website sharedparentingillinois.org. That'll do it for this edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen of DadsDivorce.com. We'll see you next time.